Welcome to Path to Peace with Todd Perlmutter. I'm your host, Todd Perlmutter. Our world is a projection of our collective consciousness. The more peace we bring into our lives, the more peace we bring into this world. So let the transformation begin. Most of us think that the mind is this real entity that we experience in our brain. We think we are our brain and our mind. But we are simply observing the contents of this brain and mind. We are not looking at the neurons. We are looking at thoughts. We are not looking at that 10-pound gray matter inside our skull. We are looking through a projection of that neurological activity onto our consciousness. And just like we do not see the world with our eyes, instead photons fire into our eyeballs, they hit the back of our retina, and the brain interprets the signals into an image. And likewise, we observe the mind with our third eye, with that light of consciousness, that we are able to gaze our awareness at whatever we choose to. And oftentimes, it becomes fully absorbed by our mind, and we become oblivious to what is happening around us as we get lost in thought, which makes up the majority of our waking life. We think it is real. We think the mind is our highest truth, the ultimate reality. And because of this, we suffer. If there was no mind, there would be no suffering. And so the first step to understanding the nature of our mind is to understand that it is the engine of our suffering. It is what holds on to a brief moment in our life that was painful and tragic, and keeps that moment alive for the rest of our lives. It is the attaching, grasping machine. But if we can witness that, if we can witness the mind, just as we witness the world around us, then the realization that it is not us naturally arises. We cannot be what we perceive. I look at a glass, but I am not the glass. I look at my thoughts, and I cannot be my thoughts. And so step 2 of understanding the mind and freeing ourselves from whatever crisis or tragedy or difficulty we're going through is to recognize that there is no self as we perceive it. Because all attachment and clinging on and carrying that baggage that we hold on to through our lives is centered around a false sense of me. The false sense is clinging. The false me is carrying a burden and a heavy load. And a false sense of I is what attaches on to whatever we have a hard time letting go of. And so when we recognize there is no self, there is no separate me, that all things are interconnected and one, and that this concept of an individual self, of a separate entity that is somehow separate from the universe and not of it and one with it, naturally, whatever we are holding on to stops. Whatever we are unable to let go of is let go, because there is no one there to do the holding. A burden is only burdensome when we are carrying it. When we dissolve, when we become totally selfless, totally present, in stillness, free from concepts and cravings, there is peace. When we truly look at the mind, we will find that there is nothing real there. It is simply a process, an ever-changing, conditioned perception that abides the law of cause and effect, which we have no control over its creation or the conditions that will affect it from outside of ourselves. It is interdependent, interconnected with everything in this universe. It is no different to our consciousness if we are witnessing something outside of us, the room we're in, the world around us, or if we are watching a dream in our mind. And everything we experience is an interpretation of reality within our mind. Within and without, it is all the same. It is deeply interconnected. What is outside of us, we experience within us, in our own mind. And what is within us determines how we see everything around us. Just as we feel 100% certain that the desk in front of me is very real and that everything is as it appears, that they are separate objects, that there is this sense of permanence, that things will last. We also have this sense that our minds must be real. There must be a self within my head, because that's where it feels like thoughts come from. And that we have this permanent self, this changeless entity that arises from our brain and this collection of neurons between our ears. But these are all illusions. Useful illusions so that these physical bodies can survive, will find food, will be able to cleverly make shelter, and stay safe when there is danger. But they are still illusions. This desk is not an independent desk. It was built by many people. It was made from raw materials that many people working together were able to mine and lumber and ship, and all thanks to that stardust and those trees and all of the living beings that created our modern environment. My mind is similarly the billions-year-long process of every ancestor I ever had. I see the world and the universe around me, and thoughts appear to my consciousness. And so I cannot claim a thought or take responsibility for a feeling any more than I can take responsibility for a dream. I cannot take responsibility for someone else's actions and I cannot take responsibility for the actions of this conditioned mind that I have access to witnessing. Because like everything in this universe, it is one, and it is in a constant state of change. And all that we really have power over is where we put our focus and attention. And most people do not practice developing this incredible power that we all have and we can all develop further. And this is where true peace and happiness lies. Only consciousness gets dropped into this universe from some other dimension, and suddenly these living beings have the power to guide and direct these physical bodies. And yet most of us go through our lives just reacting, just chaotically and aimlessly responding to whatever pops up into our field of consciousness. In an attempt to try to understand itself, we take a stand for or against everything that crosses our field of perception. We label, judge, criticize, and opinionate about everything in our lives. Because the mind is trying to understand itself, but it never can, because it can never look at itself. Only our true presence, the consciousness, awareness itself, can look at the mind to understand it. And so the mind then can stop playing these ego games of understanding itself through its relationship to others. And we can actually look directly at the mind instead of always being engaged in this analytical game that it plays 24/7. And this is actually something I talk a lot about in a new film that's coming out on July 12th at 8 a.m. called Finding Your True Self, based on the book of the same name. And that'll be out on YouTube. And when we really explore this nature of who am I, what is the mind, we always will come to the same place, which is there is nothing within. There is no self. There is no person in our head whispering to us. This mind doesn't originate from any place or source. There is no single neuron in our brain that is the one making these decisions in our lives. There is no ego. There is no persona. There is no possession of past experiences. There is just the witnessing of ever-changing processes, all conditioned based on the past, all creating the conditions that will play out when the future becomes the present. And it is through realizing this no self that we truly become free. Free from the thoughts, free from cravings, free to engage with the world around us with presence and inner stillness, without attachment to any outcome, without a need for things to go a certain way, and we become free to enjoy each moment. This can be especially tough to realize when we lose someone we love. But recognizing the no self in ourselves shows us the no-selfness in our loved ones, and that nothing is lost. Nothing can be gained. We are one with this ever-changing process, and we already have everything we will ever need, and there is no such thing as loss because nothing can ever truly be had. It is all this flow. We are in the middle of a cosmic explosion, and nothing can be grasped, and we are just hurling on a rock for a brief moment, getting to witness the show of oneness. And this is also something I talk about in great detail in my newest book, Grief and Spirituality: Surviving Life After Loss, which is now available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And I think it's so important that we realize that this sense of no self is not scary. It is liberating to discover that all fear is irrational. All craving is an illusion. And that all hatred and anger and stress and worry are just a story that we are witnessing. They are not a part of us in our truest sense. They are just the temporary, present moment, conditioned nature of the mind that we witness. And we can choose to create new conditions right here and now that generate a different story, the story that we would write from our highest wisdom. We can develop concentration and focus, and we can direct that focus onto the here and now, onto just this task at hand, and we can keep it rested in the present moment. We can become that still lake in the forest. And there can be storms, there can be chaos around us, and we will be still through it all. And when we have this stillness, our calm and peaceful energy will become like a reservoir to support our loved ones and our friends and family all around us. But first, we have to be that stillness for ourselves. We have to be that witnessing presence for our mind, for our ego, which are really two different words for the same thing. And we can let it know with our calming presence that it doesn't need those fears, that it can let go of its burdens, and that it doesn't need to constantly be worrying and analyzing and fearing and preparing for the worst. We don't want to murder our mind. We don't want to start a fight with ourselves, with an element within us, and create this duality and conflict. We want to treat it like our lost loved ones. We want to let it go with peace and love and admiration and gratitude for its noble efforts. But we can move on. We can exist in this higher mind of peace and stillness and trusting ourselves to know what is best in each situation, in each moment, without constant fear and worry. And so we do this the same way we understand any person. We just pay attention. Give it our undivided focus. We don't have to agree with everything it says. In fact, this is a state of not agreeing and not disagreeing. It is a state of being, a state of witnessing. And just as a friend who is going through a difficult time and who's trying our patience and constantly negative, we don't feed the mind with reaction. We just let it be, and we be that ear for it to vent and complain until it feels heard, and then it can get quiet. We only scream when we feel like no one's listening. And when someone is listening very carefully and understanding us, we can let go of that story. So we just witness, we just pay attention, and we understand the nature of the mind, this clinging, grasping nature. We don't wish for it to be anything other than what it is. We fully accept it. And step 2, we recognize the illusion of self that it is, that they are not, quote, unquote, my thoughts. They are just words in the ether, and we are the witness. The mind is a very powerful tool, but when we realize that it is not who we are, that it cannot control us, then it loses all power. Then it is just a robot with no arms, no legs, no ability to do anything at all. Once we show it that love, appreciation, and willingness to witness it and to accept it as it is, then it becomes our faithful servant instead of our master. Deep down, we kind of think that spending time by ourselves is boring unless my mind is entertaining me. But this is just another subconscious layer where we believe we need that constant thinking, that we would suffer without it. And so we are keeping that ego going. We are keeping that false sense of self alive because we think it serves us, because it's all we know and it feels safe and comfortable. But that is just another mind game, because underneath that fear of boredom is the deepest peace we can ever know. And we just have to be brave enough to face that mind-made fear, and we can all discover a greater joy than we ever knew possible. So make your life a meditation. Stay focused, yet relaxed, with an effort that is not too diligent or too lazy, but that middle path, that balanced path of peaceful presence. And when you realize deep down on a subconscious level that there is no mind, no entity called mind, that it is just a moment-to-moment process of thoughts popping into and out of existence, arising and falling away, coming and going like everything else. All of the problems of the mind instantly disappear. Much love. You have been listening to Path to Peace with Todd Perlmutter. Being here and putting in this important and noble work is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself and others. If you found this podcast even a little helpful, please make sure to leave a review so it can reach others who may be in need. And remember, the path to peace starts with a single step.